Hi, everybody, and welcome to NextGenInfra.io. Backed by major players including Cisco, Dell, Google Cloud, Oracle, and Red Hat, Agency is aiming to build what some are calling the Internet of Agents, enabling secure discovery, communication, and collaboration between these agents. So it's my pleasure today to be joined by Vijoy Pandey, Senior Vice President of Outshift by Cisco, to talk about what this means for the industry. Welcome, Vijoy.
Pleasure to be here, Jim.
Yeah, so tell us first of all why agency? Why did Cisco get involved in this? Why Linux Foundation? What's behind it?
Yeah, I think so. We started looking at this problem back in April of last year, April 2024, and the problem basically was we are seeing this new paradigm shift happening in computing. So we were moving from deterministic computing to probabilistic computing, and so think of it as an abstraction layer that is being built above the state of the art, which was cloud native computing, around agentic computing. So that paradigm shift was happening, and one of the big changes is the fact that agents are coming into the picture and they're being autonomous and they are solving problems for us, but they work in probabilistic ways. That's number one. But number two was the realization that agents, just like humans, are subject matter experts, and then they're really good. If you talk to me about medical health, I won't be really that good. So, subject matter experts that actually need to work in teams to solve for bigger problems. And so, there was a lack of a collaboration platform, so to speak, for these agents to then get discovered, get identified, get authorized, communicate with each other, and then solve for these bigger problems and bigger goals. And so, we created the Internet of Agents as that platform layer, as an open, interoperable internet where agents can come together, communicate, and collaborate with each other.
Okay, all right, great. So tell us a little bit more about what is it? It's a framework, it's a layer, it's a collaboration, but in the end, a protocol.
So it's an architecture, just like the internet, it's an architecture. So you had the internet that connected servers, bare metal, and web servers as software. They connected servers together to enable e-business at global scale. And then above that, we had the cloud internet, which connected SaaS endpoints or service endpoints, cloud native service endpoints, and mobile endpoints to enable SaaS at scale as well as mobile first applications at scale. So think of this as another layer of the Internet of Agents, which is connecting agentic endpoints and humans, of course, to solve for the Internet of Agents. So it's an architecture, but it allows for the four pieces that are critical to build out the Internet of Agents. The first one is discovery and identity, like we just said. So it's like, how do I discover agents that are really good at certain tasks? How do I give them identity either on my behalf or on the behalf of a task? How do I then bring them together? So that's step one, discovery and identity. How do I then bring them together, compose them into a workflow or an application to solve for a bigger business problem? Then once that is done, the third step is helping them communicate. And when they start communicating, these guys are communicating at multimodal capabilities because it's video, audio, text, and so on. So how do you do that efficiently, and how do you do it in a many to many way and in a highly secure way? So how do you bring in things like PQC and quantum safety into the communication layer? And finally, the fourth step, you've composed them, you've identified them, they're collaborating. Are they really doing what they're supposed to do? So, how do you observe them and evaluate them? So, all of those four steps are the things that we tackle in the Internet of Agents. And so, there is an implementation of that is in open source, and that is agency. And that's what we donated to the Linux Foundation. And then each one of those pieces fit within not just Cisco's, but our other partners and the 75 plus contributors that we have. All of them have products around those four phases. And there's a nice little map that you can see on the agency website. But each one of those phases, there are multiple products and multiple startups and multiple companies that are coming out with products in those spaces. So that's the way to think about it, which is the IOA. is an architecture, and all of us have products, and agency is an open source manifestation of that IOA.
Okay. Okay. I see. So I'd like to dig into the how a little bit more, but perhaps from the perspective of uh, the enterprise as well as the different vendors. Of course, all of the vendors have been building their agentic AI, capabilities, but that's inside of the Cisco environment or the HPE environment or the Dell. And here, how do you go about bridging them? I guess through this collaboration. But if you're an enterprise, what's your starting point? And if you're a vendor, what's your starting point?
So that is the complexity that we're trying to solve. So what you just said there is the problem that we're trying to solve, which is there is complexity between vendors, between organizations, within an organization. There's complexity at every level of this agentic space. And just like, again, if you think about the analogy of the internet, there's the intranet, there's the internet, but there's complexity on both ends. And there is a secure network with endpoints that are discoverable, the endpoints that are observable, that you need to build to handle this complexity. And even you need to handle organizational boundaries and policies that sit between organizations. So a lot of those principles that we solve for in the internet domain is actually applicable in the internet of agents. That's one of the reasons why we're here, but it's playing out at a different layer. So even though principally they look the same, the way you would implement these things is actually going to be different. So as an example, when you said, so what is it that we're trying to first, let's talk about a few examples. So one of the examples that we've actually, instead of tooting our own horn, let's talk about one of our partners, SoftServe, and they've talked about this publicly. They are dealing with voice agents, and they're building voice agents that need to talk to WebEx and our collaboration portfolio on the one end, but they're also talking to Salesforce agents, they're talking to ServiceNow agents, and they're building this multi-agent framework, not just for themselves. They're building in a multi-agent way, but they're also connecting in a multi-agent environment from Salesforce and from Microsoft and from ServiceNow, from Cisco, and so on. So they've been leveraging agency for a multitude of reasons. One, again, the discovery identity part. How do I even discover agents that I'm using to build in my environment? Like Cisco uses it internally to discover agents that we are building internally, nothing to do with external facing agents. But also, how do I discover agents from the ServiceNow, Salesforce, WebEx, and so on? So that's the discovery. Then you talk about identity and authorization. Can you do task-based authorization? Because agents are going to operate on a task level. And my favorite quote rather is, agents are like humans, but operating at machine speeds and scale. And so if you think of it that way, identity becomes a pretty important problem because they're neither humans, but they're also operating at machines speed and scale, and they're not machines. So
Okay.
how do you handle identity and authorization in that domain? So they've used it for that, but most importantly, what they've used agency for is real-time interactive multimodal behavior that some of these agents are going to have, and that's a very networking problem. And so if you think about voice agents, you're dealing with real-time interactive behavior, because if you don't tackle that at performance and at scale, then we will walk away from interacting with these voice agents. But then how can you do that in a many to many way, in a highly secure way that is quantum safe, and in a way that is, again, efficient and deals with this multimodality? And so we have this, for example, a layer called SLIM,
Mhm.
secure low latency interactive messaging, that is part of agency, that allows them to build these highly interactive, multimodal, highly secure, many to many multi agent applications.
Okay. A quick technical question. And with the other agency protocols out there, A to A, MCP, how do you guys fit in,
Yeah,
leveraging other people's work?
yeah. So I think that's also a good question. So one of the things that we realized early on, by the time we launched, MCP was already around, and it solves a pretty important problem, which is how do I go from an agent or an LLM to a tool or a data source that exists within a deterministic endpoint that sits within an enterprise. So that is a pretty good problem to solve, and we embraced MCP right from the get go. But we did have a protocol that dealt with agent to agent communication, and we announced back in March the whole agency framework. Very quickly, in a couple of weeks, Google came out with A2A. And so we are a founding member of the A2A project within the Linux Foundation, and Google is a formative member of the agency a project within the Linux Foundation. So we work with Google pretty closely. And we said the one thing that we don't want to do is have bifurcation and complexity in the open source and the standardization space. So we came in and we said we're going to embrace A2A for agent to agent, but we're working with Google to make sure that identity discovery, the slim layer that we just talked about, observability, all of those are sitting around A2A, sitting around MCP, because there are a whole lot of functional elements that you need to build to make agentic and multi-agentic software happen. And it's not just about a couple of protocols. I mean, they are very important, don't get me wrong, but there is A2A, there is MCP, but there's also discovery and identity and messaging and observability. And instead of solving the same things again, we decided to join forces with Google and say, yes, we're going to go with A2A. We had already embraced MCP, and we're just going to build around both of these protocols because there's so much other things to build. So if you look at our architecture diagram, you will see A2A and MCP as core elements of the agency architecture as well, because we're embracing both of those.
Excellent. A lot of good stuff there, Vijoy. So the last thing would be, what's next? How do people keep up with this, join the movement, etc.? What's next?
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot that is next. I mean, this is just the beginning, and we launched the project, but there's a ton of code out there. So you can start by going to agency.org, which is AGNTCY.org, and you can look at documentation, you can look at code, you can look at a whole bunch of webinars that we've done to get familiar with the components. Start playing with it, start building a multi-agent application. In fact, just last week, we introduced a reference application called Coffee Agency that actually is a coffee store and a coffee supply chain at the back end that is multi-agent, multi-organization, geographically distributed. So it's highly complex, but it's an open source. It's an open reference implementation that speaks to the agency architecture and works with A2A, and works with MCP, and works with Slim and all of that. So you can start there. So you can start in any of these places, but I would say go in. There's a rich environment. Learn about it. Drop in bugs, usability bugs, documentation bugs, contribute code, or even start, if you're familiar with it, start building multi-agent applications, all of the above. So vendors, operators, developers, customers, we're looking for all of these personas to help us come in and grow the community.
Excellent. Lots of good stuff to dig in there, Vijoy. And of course, Silicon Valley solves the coffee problem first. So
Right.
thank you for joining us today. A lot of good stuff. We'll keep watching.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jim.